And I want to just first of all run through very, very quickly just to show you where we have worked, Margaret and I, in Africa. And I'm doing the talking, but Margaret's done at least half of the work. You know the map of Africa from school, and the wee yellow arrows are the countries where we've mostly done some translation work. I'm not talking about training people from different countries. I've left them out. I'm not talking about students from African countries who've come to us for training. I'm only talking about places where Margaret and I have worked with translators at one stage of the project or another, from the very beginning through to the very end, and we've done some of the work there. So it's about half a dozen countries. Here's one, Ethiopia, and I'm sorry they're so small and blue, but you saw these wee blue stars near the bottom, underneath the place name and down to the Lake Turkana it is. There's a whole string of languages down there, and we've worked in a number of them, all the ones that I've marked on the page there. We've also been in Kenya for these dates too, and while we were in Kenya, we worked, I'm doing a rotten thing, haven't I, Nigel? We worked in a number of languages all over the country. You can see them there in the little blue stars as well. Everyone is a community, everyone has a name, everyone has a language. They're all different, and we've worked in all of these, either Margaret or me, over the years. There's another one there, Zambia. And Mufaya is the guy you know from Zambia. That's only one case in Zambia that I've worked with, and worked for it steadily over about a 10-year period. So I did a good deal of the Old Testament with Mufaya and the other translators whose names you don't know. And it's way out in western Zambia, right out in the sticks there. Nigeria is another place where we have worked. Margaret's been there more often than I have, and has worked with more languages there than I have, and I've not remembered to put a star in for all the languages that she worked with. I've just put one above the name of the country, and it represents the different languages that she's worked there. She's taught Greek to Nigerian translators and whatever. I am working with that one away up in the top right-hand side. This is the Mbula that you've started to hear about, and they're working their way through the Old Testament now, and we've gone through up to Numbers, and Deuteronomy will be next in the next few weeks there. Mozambique I've visited and worked with in 2 languages there. One under the word Malawi and one under the word Mozambique, 2 different languages. One was the book of Acts, one was the book of Romans, the letter to Romans. Out in Madagascar, you've heard the girl's name, Swaramino, and we've been able to support her. No, we've not worked with her. She's working through Portuguese, so we've not worked with her, but we've supported her through that. So it just gives you a very, very quick idea of the kind of places in Africa we've been and lived in and worked with people. And as I say, we're excluding just training programs. That would make it far too complex for a half hour. I want to turn to a new topic. I want to talk about Bible rivers. Now, I don't know what you think that will mean, but we all read the Bible swimming in our own river. Don't know if you've thought about that before, but that's it, and that's your river. That's the Gogo Burn, and you can read your Bible up and down the Gogo Burn, and you know the Gogo Burn. And you think what the Bible means as you walk up and down the Gogo Burn is what the Bible means. And it's not. It's just our river. Africans are walking a different river. They're swimming in a different river. You can see from that one, it's a very, very wide river. It's rivers. And all these African communities and the little blue stars, they are all swimming and reading the Bible in their own rivers. And these rivers differ from each other. But there's an African stream of river. And it's different from the Gogo Burn. So when they read the Bible, they get different things from it from what we get from it. And that's a main point I want to put across as we talk tonight. What you get from the Bible depends on the river you're swimming in. And if you haven't realized that, you're going to realize it tonight. Because the third river is that the Bible itself was created in another river altogether. A river that's not the Gogo Burn, and it's not the river in Zambia that I showed you there with all these falls. It's its own river. And if we really want to know what the Bible was trying to say, we need to get swimming in its river. Now, for someone like me, for Margaret, for you, if you go there to another place, you've got these 3 rivers to deal with. Africans only have 2 rivers to deal with. And you, as long as you stay in this country, you've only got 2 rivers to deal with. The Bible's river and the Gogoburn, the local river, the one you're used to swimming in. Translators are juggling between the 3 rivers all the time, and it causes a lot of extra effort and work there. I hope that point gets across. Not everybody sees it, that the way we understand the Bible depends on the river we're swimming in as we read it. And so you've got to learn to swim in different rivers there. A few points about translation. We've got to do the whole text. We can't, just like you do with your Bible readings, we can't just choose the nice bits and skip over all the not nice bits. We've got to do every single verse, every single sentence, every single foreign name in all these genealogies and whatever. We can't miss anything. There are no choices. We do the lot. And African translators are being trained to do the lot too. That means we've got to give, in the second point, we've got to give real meticulous attention to detail. We can't afford to let anything skip by us. Now, we're not perfect. We're human, and so things do skip by us. And my last prayer, every time we finish a book with a team of translators, is, Lord, there's still a lot of improvement to do here, but we want you to improve it and make it your word. And the translators all join in and say amen, because they know there's a lot of improvement still to do. But it's meticulous attention to detail all the way through there. 3 words that a lot of translators are taught and a lot of consultants used. We want to make a Bible that's accurate. We want to make a translation that's clear. And we want to make it in their language, not fudged with bits of English all the way through. And that's actually harder than you think. The last point is very important, easy to forget. Translation is not just a book and a pencil and paper and making a translation. It's people-centered. You're doing it for people. You're doing it with people. When I'm on Zoom all day, the relationship, the working relationship with these people on Zoom is so very important. If I'm sitting at a table with them, it's easy to see when they're not with you. You see it in their eyes, you see it in their body language. When they're on Zoom, you've got to depend on what they tell you and being honest with you. It's people-centered. Let's turn to another point and look at some simple Bible problems. And I'll do this for the rest of the time. And I've just put 3 ordinary, simple, everyday Bible words on the board there. Bread. You can think of bread in the Bible. Your minds are already racing and you're thinking of bread here and bread there and bread the next place. You know, Africa doesn't have bread. They learned bread from the colonials. They learned it from the British. They learned it from the French, from the Portuguese. They don't have bread of their own. They've got their own food, but it's not bread. Okay, and so we're translating bread in the Bible. We've got a problem right away. What on earth are they going to say for a simple thing like bread? I'm the bread of life. What are they going to say? When you break this bread, remember me, as the communion service has it. Every time they met daily in their homes for the breaking of bread, what are they going to say? The worst solution is that they translate it as bready, which is what Africa would love to do, because it's the easy way out. And that doesn't get as far as Passover bread, unleavened bread. What are they going to do for that? Because they don't have yeast either, except the natural sourdough. But they can't see the yeast. They don't add anything to it. It's just old dough that goes sour, and it creates more sourdough from day to day when they add it to the new batch. So they don't know about yeast. They do know its results, but they don't know the word, and they don't know about bread. If they know bread, it's because they go to a shop that learned how to do it the European way. And they can certainly eat bread if they live in the towns. But the farmers out in the countryside, they don't eat bread. So what does Jesus mean when he says, I'm the bread of life? What are you going to do there? Well, the next 2 I'll do quickly. Priest and prophet are all over the Bible. The problem's the opposite here. They have priests. They have prophets. But they belong in their traditional religion. And sometimes they're scared to use these words because it seems to draw Christianity into their own traditional set of beliefs. And so you have to discuss even words like priest and prophet. They're on every page of the Bible. Every page, they're everywhere. And you've got to find ways that you're going to do that and translate in their language. One way example, just to lighten that up, you get to the book of Numbers, you know the story of Balaam and the ass that talked to him when it saw the angel of the Lord that he couldn't see. That whole story, 3 chapters, Balaam is never called a prophet in the Old Testament. He's called a diviner, a spirit, a spirit censor, a witchcraft worker. The Bible doesn't call him a prophet. And it doesn't call what he says God's word, God's oracles. It calls it a parable, wise words. And you don't see that when you look at English. The only person in the Balaam story who uses the word oracles is Balaam himself. And he says, it's my oracles. You've got to see the difference. The Bible doesn't say that. It's Balaam who says it. It calls him a diviner. It calls these words clever words, but it never calls him a prophet, and it doesn't allow him to go further and call his words the words of the Lord. So you're looking for these things all the way through there. Let's go and look at some verses here. This one in Jeremiah chapter 2. It was Jeremiah that I first got consulting in Kenya. I did it with 2 groups of people. One, the language is Ekigusi, and the other, the language is Maasai, and that one you've heard of. Everybody's heard of the Maasai. Well, when I was with the Maasai translator and we were going through Jeremiah, imagine being asked at the beginning of your career to advise a translator in the book of Jeremiah. That's crazy. That's been thrown in the deep end, isn't it? Well, we got no further than chapter 2, and we came to this verse. And never mind the first line with these Memphis and Tahpanhes, 2 cities in Egypt. Look at the second line. They've broken the crown of your head. And he had, quite naturally, thought in terms of kings wearing a hat, a crown of some kind. And he translated like that. But it's not what the verses say. They've smashed the top of your skull. And he was so surprised to realize that this wasn't a crown. And the English translation is push him in that direction. You look up some of your own translations at home and see what they do. They might have broke your skull or something like that. So that was the first one. And I came to my mind just the other day because I was sitting down the front reading in Joshua with this Bible. And it's actually the Bible I used way back there in 78 with these Gusi people and Maasai people. And if you turn to Jeremiah, it's got all my yellow markings about the places I wanted to ask questions. I don't think it's good enough to go in a museum or anything like that, but it's very funny looking at that. The next one I did was Genesis up in the north of Kenya. And I just found out yesterday, it's got all my markings too, in yellow, all the way through. There's no questions, there's no English questions written there, just the yellow marking on the page about where I needed to ask questions, even before I got to sit and talk with them. The translator in Borana, just for your interest, was Stephen Houghton. His grandfather wrote the hymn, the missionary hymn. Look it up and you'll find it. I can't remember the first words. If you know it, you can shout them out. Well, that was the first one. The guy had got off on the wrong track altogether with the word crown, and it was the English translation that set him off on the wrong pathway. And we had to see that that wasn't what it was right. And here's another one, Genesis 49. Jacob talks to all his sons, and he's just about wiped out. And so in yellow, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Now, the drew up and the gathered is the same word in Hebrew. It means literally pulled together, just in a broad way pulled together. So he's lying in his bed. What is he doing? Imagine it, just think of it. With all these verses, get a picture in your mind. He's lying there, his last gasp. what he does is straighten his legs out and put them together and take his last breath, because he wants his legs straight so that when the rigor mortis sets in, he's straight. He's not all crumpled up and bent with his legs any old way. That's what he's doing there. He pulled his legs together in the bed. He got himself ready for death and burial. But it doesn't look like it from that translation there. The translation's gone off in another direction because I think the translators don't know somewhere like the third world, like Africa, where everybody knows that's what you do when you're dying. You put your legs out straight, right in front of you, the bed, and that's you. You're ready for the family to come and wash you and bind you up in cloth. Well, you've got to see what they've done in the translation, and they've been misled by the English, or if they've understood the way they should. Here's one from Joel there. It's Lent. We're just into Lent, running up to Easter. And it's the yellow line again. Rend your hearts and not your garments. Well, for a start, the heart word doesn't work in Africa. It would be your stomach. That already brings you up with a jolt, doesn't it? And rending your garments or tearing your garments, a well-known Bible gesture of distress. But is it known in Africa? Why would you tear your clothes? Why would Joel tell you to tear your clothes? And how on earth can you tear your stomach? And what would it mean anyway? Well, if that's not bad enough, let me remind you of the old AV, which 2 or 3 times says bowels of mercy. Right? You remember it? It's exactly the same problem, whether it's your heart or your stomach or something else. You've got to work out, what's this actually doing? And have the translators understood it? And have they done that a nice way? And you sit and talk about it if they haven't. And here's another one from Psalms, and I'm only going to connect this. There's a wee Bible school in Stewarton. I'm sure it must be Brethren, and they put their sermons on YouTube. And they've got a wee YouTube in the Psalms about my reins instructing me. And the sermon's about God treating us like a horse with reins and guiding us through our lives. And isn't it what it means? French people, if you speak French, you know what it means. Reins are kidneys. And the AV translators used that word and spelled it an English way, but what their meaning is kidneys. The Lord has his hand in your kidney. What on earth does that mean? Go and look up the psalm when you get home tonight and see if the translators have done what they should do with reins or kidneys or whatever it is they've said there. You can see how translators were totally off the wall here if they were using the AV, which they don't. If they were using the AV, they would go way off in the wrong direction altogether with the word reins here. They'd be talking about oxen and pulling ox carts and guiding oxen across the fields. It's wrong. Okay, let's move to the New Testament. We're nearly finished, Jim. Don't worry. And you know these verses here where Herod has a panic attack, thinks John the Baptist has come back from death to life again. Because John had been put in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, and so forth. You know these verses there. Well, in Africa, a common assumption is that John was speaking against taking your brother's widow and taking her home and caring for her. Now, how do they get there? They get there because of the custom that when your brother dies, you take his widow into your home. Your family has already given dowry for her to her family, so she's now a woman in your family. She belongs to your family for care. Yes, and the best way to care for her is take her into your home. And the best way to make sure that the care happens is she becomes one of your wives. That's Africa, and that's the Old Testament. Okay? And they naturally make that assumption, and they naturally then come to the conclusion that John the Baptist is speaking against that custom. Now, he's not. You know he's not, but we get there by a mistake. We get there because we don't have that assumption. We assume that John's speaking about seducing his brother's wife. And we go further than that, and most of us probably say, well, Philip's wife's still alive. Philip's still alive. Where do we get that from? Our Sunday school teacher? Well, the teacher's right. Or a pastor or preacher in our churches when we were young. They're right. But it doesn't say so in the words of Mark 6. It doesn't say Philip's alive. But you do get enough in the text to push you that way if you know that Philip's still alive and that the other brother has done a bad thing here. And that's what John the Baptist was speaking against. Okay, so we've got to steer the translators through that, make sure they know Philip's still alive. And they nearly fall off their chair when you tell them that. They think it's a widow he's taking home and treating as a wife. And they can't imagine how you can seduce your brother's wife while he's still alive. Well, I don't have time to go into it, but the wife is actually the niece of Philip. She married her uncle. That was the first one. Secondly, when she goes to the other guy, he's another uncle, because they're both brothers with Herod as their father. And the daughter marries a great uncle who was another son of Herod. The whole family's a mess. You can see what John the Baptist was talking about, but of course it's not in the text. The only thing you need to know is Philip's still alive. Gospel of John, chapter 13. You know this bit well, and you might even know some of the answers to it. You might know all the answers to it. Where Jesus says to his disciples, someone's going to betray me. They'll say, who? Is it me? Imagine they didn't even know it wasn't going to be them. Is it me? And then the disciple who's leaning back against Jesus, they're lying down, eating. Let that go. Who is it, Lord? And Jesus answered, I'll give this morsel of bread when I've dipped it. It's the person I give it to. He dipped the bread. He gave it to Judas. Now that's a funny thing to do. And we don't really have the assumptions that we should bring in the Bible River. One, they're all sitting around a wee table. Two, there's one dish on the table with the food there, and they all reach out and take some of the bread and scoop up some of the food and put it into their mouths. No forks, no knives, fingers. As Africans will tell you, you've got a fork in the end of each arm. So you use your fingers, you pick up the bread, you pick up the sauce, whatever it is you're having, and you put it in your mouth. Now, just for fun and good relationships, every now and again someone will do it to a good friend as a gesture of friendship. And I could pick it up and put it into Margaret's mouth. I'd be more likely to do it to one of the translators at the table, or they would do it to me and scoop up the food in the bread and put it out into my... And that's what Jesus is doing. And you only do it to your special friends. And you begin to see something terribly wrong, that Judas is sitting at that table. And that Jesus knows what he's going to do next. And the disciple who asked the question, who is it? Realizes when Judas gets the bread and takes it into his mouth. Wow. And he goes out and betrays Jesus. We don't have this idea of eating really from a single dish. It's not a dish on the table and you go and help yourself buffet style. It's the dishes on the table and you reach out and take mouthfuls. All of you. Turn by turn until you're all done your dinner. Okay, and the second one, you're using your fingers. And the third one, the friendly gesture towards someone special, that you will actually do it and put the food in their mouth. And that happens again and again in Ethiopia. When you have groups of people eating meals, they will do that. Where do we go from here? Problems and new work, and this is really into you now, Jim, with your list here of prayer points. The internet connection with North Nigeria is not good. They're way out in the sticks. It's a county town right away out in the sticks, and the internet connection breaks down. That's why in the first slides I said thank you to BEC, that occasionally when the thing crashes, I can use the BEC connection and re-establish a connection with them. It's in my control at first. I make them the host, and so we go on. Maintaining relationships on Zoom is hard work. They can sleep. As long as one of them stays awake, the work can go on. But I can't sleep. From 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm the one that can't sleep. Just like the last 20 minutes, I've got to be constantly on the ball, even if they have a wee snooze or go to the loo or have a tea break or whatever. As long as one or two of them are there, the talk can go. I don't know that they're sleeping. But if I sleep, the whole thing breaks down. So it's hard work. 6 hours at a stretch, day after day, until you've done about 8 or 9 days of that. Deuteronomy is next. I don't know if it will come this month of March or if it will come next month of April. I'll be texting them tomorrow.